I cautiously start episode 159 of the My Nerd World, welcome to it, Star Wars podcast. I say that because it has been a roller coaster of a week of Star Wars news that hasn't really resulted in anything new. And I know that sounds ridiculous, but it's kind of true. So on the show this week, earlier in the week, we had this bizarro Rian Johnson Super Bro movies controversy that we'll get into. Then we had the announcement of Triple Force Friday. We'll give you details about that. Then we had a rumor about an alleged European movie chain that may have gotten a teaser in the mail and didn't have a key to open it yet. And this was coming from Fantatrax, which has a good track record, in which case they were saying that maybe the teaser and the title are imminent. And then we got the first photo since J.J. Abrams first started filming of the crew, specifically Daisy Ridley, Oscar Isaac, and John Boyega, saying that the movie had wrapped. But yet we still don't have a title. We have so much to get to. I'll try to work through all of it, plus all of your listener feedback this week. The show is brought to you by the science fiction adventure novel Embark, available now in audio, in an audiobook, ebook, paperback, and Kindle Unlimited. More details about that later on in the show. Let's get right to it.
Nothing will stand in our way.
I find your lack of faith disturbing.
I will finish what you started.
Who are you? I'm no one.
There are stories about what happened.
It's true. All of it.
The Force. It's calling to you.
My Nerd World.
Just let it in.
You know, and I say I trepidatiously start this podcast because, like, I'm just worried that something's gonna drop after I get the show done this week. I've actually been waiting a little bit longer to sit down and record it. Welcome to My Nerd World. I am your host, Jon Justice, and I'm really glad you're with the show once again this week. As always, you can email me, talkshownerd@gmail.com, or drop a comment on YouTube while you're listening. We do have a big listener feedback portion of the show again this week, and we have a lot of just... It's been a heavy news week that hasn't resulted in the things that we're waiting for. Like, there's stuff to talk about, but we still don't have a title and we still don't have a teaser. So let's start here and begin working through sort of the week that was. This story is old news now, and that's a really, really good thing in my opinion. But I woke up on, I guess it would have been Thursday morning, and my notifications on my phone were... It just had blown up overnight. I go to bed really early because of my Monday through Friday job as a talk show host, and I go to bed usually at 7:30, and I get up at 2:30 in the morning. So a bunch of stuff happened as I went to bed. Specifically, a story was put up on a site I'd never heard before, the Super Bro Movies website. And on that website, they had said that per sources that they had, that this website had, that Rian Johnson had stepped away from doing his trilogy. And this, of course, just erupted, especially considering the fact that we still didn't have at the time, anything official in regards to Episode 9. So people are clamoring for stuff to talk about. So by the time that I had woken up, this had been refuted. Rian Johnson actually responded directly to the article, and people asking him, saying that no, he absolutely was still working on the trilogy. Pablo Hidalgo also went and responded. Super Bro Movies went and apologized to Rian Johnson for putting that out there, and yet we had the fandom just erupting over this whole thing, right down the Last Jedi controversial lines, right? which is really unfortunate. That's the part of the whole thing that really kind of bummed me out, was that it really ended up fueling a lot of speculation and commentary, especially around the negativity towards The Last Jedi. I don't want to spend a ton of time on this. Okay, right? The story came out, obviously wasn't true. Rian Johnson's still working on it. Some people, thank goodness, I'm really looking forward to that trilogy. We mentioned last week the possibility of a plot line. And again, I don't think that was real. I just thought it was interesting. Just from a standpoint of this is potentially what a story could look like that Rian Johnson could do outside of what we're used to seeing in the Star Wars universe of the content that we've come to love. A brand new story, what would that look like? And that's what last week's synopsis was. I do want to make one comment, and then we're going to move on to the other items since that story is already in the past, but it was worth talking about. I would love one day, and this is not me looking to kick open the door for a conversation about whether or not The Last Jedi is good. Art is subjective. I love the movie. I personally think it's a masterpiece. At the moment, it is my favorite Star Wars movie ever. And I'm not looking to go and open up a debate and talk about, the pros and cons of the movie. If you don't like it, that's fine. You don't have to like it. But you're not changing my mind about me liking it. I do want to mention, though, that it's an interesting observation seeing the commentary around the negativity of The Last Jedi. It's mostly male-driven, and I don't know if that... As a matter of fact, I would almost say it's exclusively male-driven. I have not seen any females in the fandom coming out as harsh as we have the male fans of Star Wars against the film. I don't know if there's anything to that. It's just an observation. But what I'm most curious of, I would love to know, because I don't know if this is true, I would love to know if there is something specific about the way that certain fans view the original trilogy that directly correlates to their frustration with The Last Jedi. I don't know what that is, but it's very, very clear that, again, I don't think it's the majority. It's a minority, but it's a very loud minority because it's easier to go and look at all the negativity that's out there, right? If you love The Last Jedi, you've probably expressed that already, especially if you host podcasts. You also probably don't want to keep going down that road and praising the movie as much as you still see people that are harping on it negatively. I just wonder what that fundamental difference is of people that view the original trilogy that has such a hard time, specifically with what happened with Luke. I wonder if there's something there. Like, is there something specifically different to the way that I look at the original trilogy that makes me love The Last Jedi as opposed to somebody else? And again, I don't know what that is, and I'm not even necessarily searching for an answer. I'm just tossing out sort of a hypothetical. You're welcome to comment on it, obviously. You can leave an email, talkshownerd@gmail.com, or as always, leave a comment on YouTube. I find it really, really interesting, because it's so specific to a certain group of people who love the original trilogy, and yet for a whole other group of people, the majority of people that went to the movie and saw it over and over and over again, that gave it its amazing numbers and made Disney so much money, they obviously didn't have the problems that everybody else are so passionate about. I just find that interesting. I think on a long enough timeline, we'll have some better answers in regards to all the frustration around that movie. But I've mentioned before, good art does that. Good art is divisive. That's not to say that good art can't be divisive. It is to say that, a lot of times really good art is really, really divisive, and I think that that's definitely the case when it comes to the Last Jedi. Okay, so moving on from there. We got the announcement of Triple Force Friday. And I believe we actually got this. Yeah, we did. So we got both of these pieces of news happened on Friday. The story goes like this. I'm looking at it from StarWars.com. Let's see. Triple Force Friday, the latest in a tradition of Star Wars product launches, is set for October 4th. Lucasfilm and Disney announced the event will see the debut of brand new products inspired by 3 of the year's biggest Star Wars releases, including the highly anticipated final installment of the Skywalker saga, Star Wars Episode 9, the first ever live-action series, The Mandalorian, set to debut exclusively on the upcoming streaming service Disney+. The latest title from EA and Respawn, Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order, a brand new adventure game releasing holiday 2019. Products spanning categories from toys to collectibles, housewares, books, apparel, and more will go on sale beginning at 12:01 a.m. on October 4th. As with past Force Friday celebrations, stores around the world will join in the festivities with in-store events and midnight openings. Stay tuned to StarWars.com for more on Triple Force Friday. I'm really glad they're doing this, because the last Force Friday just fell flat, as did the one that was attached to Rogue One. It didn't have that same punch that The Last Jedi did. And this being the first official bit of promotional information, right? This was the first, and then later in the day we got the wrap news, and we'll talk about that in a bit. And of course, I've used the photo that J.J. Abrams tweeted out for the podcast this week. But I'm really super excited that they're focusing on this, and they're going to make it a big event again. Because to me, again, this is part of the fun of Star Wars. And when it came to The Last Jedi, I remember the morning that the toys were released, it was incredibly disappointing. I left early, went over to my local Walmart. They hadn't even opened the boxes yet. And then I went to go to another place. They didn't have anything set up, so I went to work, and then I went shopping once the show was over and found what it was I was looking for. But it just didn't have the same punch or excitement as it did for The Force Awakens. And it seemed like they'd really kind of lost their way. So the fact that they're making this a Triple Force Friday and really zeroing in that, hey, this is going to be Episode 9, this is going to be The Mandalorian, and this is going to be for the new Jedi Fallen Order game, and October 4th is going to be the day, and we should be getting the full trailer for Episode 9 right around that same time. They're also waiting later this year than they have in the past. I believe The Last Jedi one was late August or early September. So this got me really, really excited. And of course, got the wheels turning as to whether or not are we going to be getting that title of the movie and potentially a trailer. Then later in the day, it was at 1:47 p.m., J.J. Abrams tweeted out a photo. And this was a behind-the-scenes photo. You could see the cast and crew in the background. They were, this was taken on the Wadi, I keep getting this wrong here. Let me make sure I get this right. The photo was taken on the Wadi Rum set. I got that wrong last week. It shows Daisy Ridley, John Boyega, and Oscar Isaac all together. You can't really see Daisy's face. She's looking off to the side. You've got John Boyega looking off in the distance, smiling, and then you looks like almost a crying Oscar Isaac. So what I found interesting about this photo, by the way, is that if it wasn't for the crew in the background of the shot, I would have thought this was a photo from the movie. It looks like something big has just happened and they're all embracing each other because of some event that happened. But clearly you can see the cast and crew members. You can see crew members in the background. So I don't know why this particular shot was taken. This shoot on Wadi Rum in Jordan took place long before. There's a lot of speculation that it may be the beginning of the film where we get these desert sequences, because JJ likes to shoot in order. And now that the movie has wrapped its initial production, I'm sure there'll be some reshoots. And that was taking place at Pinewood. This would suggest, if JJ shot this movie as he did before, that this desert scene was taking place at the beginning of the film and not later in the film. Okay, so I want to share some commentary from MakingStarWars.net, but I want to offer my own little speculation on this, because there's a bit of information in the MakingStarWars.net article that I wasn't aware of that we now have an answer to, particularly how Rey looks and why she looks the way that she does. This is a confirmation of the leak that we had last week on the show, those photos that leaked out that we covered at length. And I think I don't think there was any question that those weren't real. They were obviously, it was clear that those photos were real last week, but this is certainly confirmation of that. I am of the opinion that this does start in a desert sequence. Episode 9 does, and that it's going to be very reminiscent of Return of the Jedi in that regard. I think JJ's probably taking a cue from that, and it's probably going to echo that. I also want to add that I think this is Jakku. I'm changing my opinion on this. I think this is Jakku. And the reason I think it's Jakku is because, and this may be somewhat controversial, and I would be very curious to get your thoughts. I have no basis, again, of fact on this. This is just my own personal speculation. But I think that this Episode 9 movie is going to be because we've been told this, the last of the Skywalker films. But I also don't think it's going to wrap up these 9 stories in the way that a lot of us assume it's going to. A lot of speculation, myself included, about whether or not they're going to visit some old planets from previous movies outside the sequel trilogy. And I was of the opinion that perhaps they're going to go to Jeddah. Makes a lot of sense. A lot of Jedi history there. Introduced to that in Rogue One. Maybe we're going to go there. I'm starting to think that's not the case anymore. And the reason being is that I'm starting to look at this sequel trilogy. That doesn't mean that and hear what I'm saying here. Okay, don't misread what I'm saying. I don't believe the sequel trilogy was a soft reboot of the franchise. I think the sequel trilogy in Star Wars is very unique in that they needed to bring the fandom back to the fold. And J.J. Abrams did that with The Force Awakens, with a movie that had a lot of echoes, a lot of nods to the original trilogy. You can easily go and look at that first film of the sequel trilogy and say this got elements from all the sequel trilogies, right? This was, let's bring the fans back. Let's give everybody a movie that is reminiscent of that original trilogy, less like the prequel trilogy. I also think that these 3 movies, the sequel trilogy, is going to be very self-contained in the same way that the prequels were and in the same way that the original trilogy was. I got kind of swept up in the hype that maybe this film will really bridge the gap of all 9 movies and we'll be going back to, Naboo, and we're going to go back to Tatooine. And I think it makes more sense that we don't go back to those places. I think it makes more sense that Episode 9 mirrors the original trilogy and ties it all together because of the themes and maybe in terms of style and the way the story plays out. I think Episode 9 is going to be very reminiscent of Return of the Jedi. I think it's going to start back off on a desert planet in some type of mission. We do have further details and speculation about the Knights of Ren coming back from the beyond, this potential MacGuffin in the film that may be driving the plot, something that everybody's after. Poe Dameron with the Resistance is out trying to recruit more individuals and armies to go and join in the fight. Along with the Resistance against the First Order. More than likely, it's going to culminate in a big space battle at the end of this movie. And something involving Rey and Kylo in some way, shape, or form. Talked about that quite a bit, that the culmination of the film would be the, Rey and Kylo Ren and Ben Solo together. Again, listen to episode number 158, and you can hear me talk about that. But I think that this film is going to be unique to this sequel trilogy, and we may not be visiting other planets like we did before, and even storyline-wise. I know that Collider and there's individuals, Christian Harloff's been talking about the fact that Palpatine might return in this movie, and that's why Ian McDiarmid has said that he's coming out to Celebration in Chicago in April, and I just am really thinking that's not going to be the case. I think that this story is about these 3 characters that we saw in this wrap photo, and I'll share with you what JJ said here in a bit. I think that the story is about Kylo Ren. I think that there is a thread. It's going to be involving the Knights of Ren and something that they have found, the conflict within Ben Solo. I don't think we're going to have this massive tie-in that's going to, 1, shake up what we already know about these 9 films, right? People are throwing out theories that maybe, and I've done this in the past, that maybe the Chosen One is completely different. Maybe the Chosen One's actually Rey. Maybe the Chosen One was actually Kylo Ren. And the comments of Yoda going back to Revenge of the Sith, a prophecy misread we may have. I think that was Revenge of the Sith. It might have been. Anyway, I'm not going to wipe out on that. I don't necessarily think that's the case. I think the sequel trilogy is going to be its own separate entity, and the tie-in to the other films is just going to be wrapping up the culmination of the story and the connection specifically that Ben Solo has to, Leia and to Han. I think that's where this whole thing is headed. And I also think that it might be a little bit disjointed to do that, to reintroduce Palpatine in some way, shape, or form. I again, it feels that feels to me fan servicey. The better storytelling could be to continue the story of these three individuals and not necessarily bring in elements from the first, 6 films, apart from the connections that we have with the original cast members. So again, that's just my pure speculation about it. I have no indication whatsoever, but to me, that makes more sense right at the moment. That could change when we do episode number 160, and the first time that we end up seeing a teaser for the film. So this is what J.J. Abrams ended up tweeting out. He said this: "It feels impossible, but today wrapped photography on episode 9. There is no adequate way to thank this truly magical cast and crew. I'm forever indebted to you all." And if you go on the Reddit leaks, Star Wars leaks page, there's a lot of different posts showing the different cast members going and putting stuff on social networking about their wrapping up. I'm looking at one right here. Kathleen Kennedy gave a vintage 1977 Chewbacca costume to Jonas Suetamo as a wrap gift. Also, John Boyega put out an Instagram picture sharing that he was given a blaster from Kathleen Kennedy after he wrapped. I'm actually looking at it right now. Yeah, John Boyega receives blaster as a wrap gift from Kathleen Kennedy. So the speculation is now that we should be getting the title at some point very, very soon. Those that were saying we wouldn't get a title before the movie wrapped, you guys were 100% right. The movie has wrapped now, and it could literally drop at any moment. And I think there's an argument to say that it could drop this weekend. It could have dropped right now. Let me look at my phone. Nope, hasn't yet. It could drop this weekend. It could drop tomorrow. I know a lot of people are pointing to ABC debuting The Force Awakens, and the Oscars are tomorrow. Maybe that'll happen. Monday is President's Day, so I don't think it necessarily would drop on President's Day, but maybe it'll drop on Tuesday. I do think it's coming very, very soon. And I also do think there's going to be some footage attached to it. It may not be a lot, but I do think we're getting some type of teaser. Mentioned it before, perhaps something that's a culmination of clips of all the films leading into 9. Perhaps it's something more akin to the Frozen teaser trailer that we got earlier this week as well. For everybody saying, and I'm really tired of hearing this, we're not going to get a trailer until Celebration. Look, everybody knows we're getting footage at Celebration. I absolutely. There's going to be some type of teaser or trailer at Celebration. But that doesn't mean that we won't get one between now and then. And there's nothing to say that we wouldn't. We're right now in completely uncharted territory. We've never gotten a title for a movie this late before. The last time when they wrapped, they immediately went and gave us the title. We don't have that yet. And none of this lines up with any of the past marketing plans. They've moved Force Friday around from where it was before. So this is a completely different ballgame when it comes to marketing. And I personally expect that when we get the title announcement, it's going to be attached to some type of teaser, and it's going to get dropped exactly the same way that Disney did Aladdin, in exactly the same way that they did Frozen 2, and I think they put both of those out there to get them out of the way as we start to head into the promotion of Episode 9. And it makes sense right now, too, for Disney to do that as soon as possible because of their other properties. We're about to get into the movie season here really quick, and when you look at the calendar, this weekend coming up, How to Train Your Dragon 3, and then the next big movie is Captain Marvel. So when you look at this week, next week, and the week after that, I think that we're getting something big probably this week, which will provide a lot of hype and a lot of conversation for the week of the 25th to the 28th. And then that'll clear the path for Disney to start focusing on Captain Marvel, which comes out on March 8th. And then you've got a bunch of free weeks until you get to Celebration, right? And then you have Celebration the second week of April, and then a full week with nothing going on, and then the week after that is the week of Avengers Endgame. So this whole thing is about to get underway. It's gotten underway. The marketing for episode 9 is here. Embrace it, love it, right? Don't push it to don't push it to the side, right? Don't let old things die. Embrace the hype. That's what I am doing, and you should go and you should do that too.
I need someone to show me my place in all this.
And as always, that's you and your comments and your emails and your commentary. Listener feedback for the show this week. I'm not going to get into anything specific in terms of direct content like I have in the past, or I haven't watched any Star Wars movies as of late. My dad's visiting. I'm a big NASCAR fan. Daytona 500 is this weekend. And I'm going to reserve some of the next commentary around when we get the title and hopefully when we get a teaser. And there's a lot of listener feedback we have to get to this week. So we're going to dive right into it. This one fell by the wayside last week. I meant to do this particular email on last week's show, and it slipped by me, so my apologies to Severin Weichman, but they write this. Thanks for your podcast, John. Really entertaining, and I love the logical explanations of Reylo. Not just Twitter-padded teenage yearning for a gushy soap opera love story, but actual facts pointed out from both TFA and The Last Jedi that very definitely point toward a genuine romance, however demurely shown in the films between Rey and Kylo. Oh, don't misunderstand. In my head, it's a gushy soap opera love story. I'm a romantic at heart. Just kidding. I am a romantic at heart, though. I really hope JJ will take the story in the direction of Bendemption in 9. I don't have to have a mushy Amidala-esque kiss scene, but a happy ending with Rey and Ben holding hands, binary sunset in the background, hinting at their future lives together, or something would be pretty awesome. Would be a pretty awesome early Christmas present for me. Thanks again. Keep it coming. P.S. Also love that the Reylo haters haven't seemed to have found your corner of the galaxy yet. Oh, they have. They absolutely have. I just delete a lot of their comments. Across the Stars writes this. Totally agree with you, John, about love playing such a huge part in Star Wars. It does, and I don't get those who say that it doesn't. I guess that's why I'm always so bothered by people saying Kylo was just manipulating Rey when he wanted her to join him. Rian Johnson said that was his version of I'm just a boy standing in front of a girl asking her to love him. He genuinely cares about her. Oh, man, I love that. I really do love that, because I love that moment in that scene, too. I'm just a boy standing in front of a girl asking her to love him. That's fantastic. Thank you for the comment across the stars. I really do appreciate it. Richard Cowell writes this. As to the Jeddah thing, it's totally plausible. My voice cracked there a little bit. It's totally plausible for them to go there because Rey needs a new Kyber crystal. And there must be some left over. And as far as the movies go, Jeddah is the only place to go and get one. Richard, you make a very good point, and I would love to see Jeddah in the film. I think that would be absolutely fantastic. I need to pull an audible here. I know I got into listener feedback, but I have to apologize. I got into listener feedback way too soon. I actually did have more to talk about. So we're going to go ahead and back up before we get into more listener feedback.
Something inside me has always been there. But now it's awake. And I need help.
See, this is what happens when I do the show sort of in a live form. My dad's visiting, and he wanted to see how he listens to the podcast every week in my weekly radio show, and he wanted to see sort of my setup for doing the podcast. And I use a program off of Spreaker, this broadcaster program, and it's fantastic. But I do the whole show live. I don't do any very minimal editing. I don't edit it together. I really do treat it the same way that I do the radio show, as if I was live on the air. And so because of that, I make mistakes like I just did, because I meant to talk about this Making Star Wars article, and I didn't do that. So we'll do that now, and then we'll get back to listener feedback. Again, that's what happens when you do a podcast, as if you were doing a live show. So this is what Jason Ward had to say over MakingStarWars.net. Very relevant to all the conversations we were just having. Here's a couple of things sources have clarified for us recently. This isn't meant to debunk anything or anyone. I'm only sharing what I was told to help us better take a look at what should be in store for us in Star Wars Episode 9. Our sources confirmed to us that the wrap party for Episode 9 is tomorrow. This was, he put this out yesterday. So, of course, we saw Abrams let us know that the film has wrapped today. There's some minor spoilers here. Just want to kind of put a warning there. It's nothing great. A lot of this is still speculation. It's just what they're hearing. But I'm just letting you know there is some spoilers here. Rey's hair, in the photo that JJ put out, Rey's hair is back in the 3 buns. And we talked about it last week, how her outfit is very, very similar to the outfit that she had in The Last Jedi. In The Force Awakens. Rey's hair is in the style above because it has to match older footage of Rey that was shot with Carrie for The Force Awakens. The details of the sequence are not being talked about at this time, however. That's really interesting on a lot of different levels. That makes all the sense in the world. I can't wait to find out how J.J. Abrams ends up handling that particular piece of information, or how he ends up handling that detail to explain why she's dressed back the way that she was in The Force Awakens and why she has her hair back that way. Somebody noticed this too, and I tend to agree. In the photo that was leaked last week, and from what you can tell in this particular photo that was taken, Daisy Ridley's, doesn't look nearly as buffed out. And that's not even a good word. There are parts of, and if you watch the movie, every time I watch the film, The Last Jedi, I notice this. And I don't know if it's camera angles, I don't know if it's reshoots, but obviously Daisy Ridley looks older in The Last Jedi than she did in The Force Awakens. And I'm totally fine with that, right? The movie was filmed after The Force Awakens was done. She's going to look a little bit different. I think she had been working out quite a bit more for The Last Jedi, and so she was I don't want to say bulked up, but she was more fit, right? And there's some moments in The Last Jedi, however, where her body looks more like it did in The Force Awakens, especially that final shot on the Millennium Falcon when she shuts the door on Kylo Ren. She looks thinner in that photo. She looks great throughout the movie, so please don't misunderstand what I'm saying. There just seems to be a difference when in certain parts of the film, and I think a part of that has to do with the fact that there were reshoots, and she may have put on a little bit of weight or bulked up working out in some shots as opposed to other shots. In what we've seen so far, she looks as fit and thin as she did in The Force Awakens, and I wonder if that was to match that footage better that they're using of Carrie Fisher, because they'd have to make her look just a little bit younger, but her hair is back up in those buns. Okay, I've wiped out enough on Daisy Ridley. And I'll just say, before anybody thinks that I wasn't fat-shaming by any stretch of the imagination, I think that she is beautiful and looks fantastic in both of those films, so I got a thing for Rey. Anyway, all right. Sources believe the first trailer will be different than the one that was shown to the crew around Christmas of 2018. That trailer showed a bit more than you would think they would want to share at this moment, but didn't delve into the plot at all. Everyone says it was so good, and it apparently was apparently scored using only Star Wars Episode 9 footage. So we might have a shot at seeing it at some point. In terms of a new trooper in 9, apparently there are over 50 of them. However, they are not being called Sith Troopers by anyone from Pinewood. That language apparently was picked up or appropriated by others as a synonym for bad guys. Those troopers do only answer to Kylo Ren and the Knights of Ren, though. And apparently these are the Red Stormtroopers. We've talked about it on a previous show. That there's a new group of Red Stormtroopers in this film. The MacGuffin is controversial as an idea. However, sources say that's not the case in execution. They have also said that the MacGuffin actually evolves as the story progresses, so we apparently won't begin the film with everyone searching for something right off the bat. In theory, that is an interesting way to start the Star Wars film with what we know about the movie so far. Sources have been pretty tight-lipped about Matt Smith, but I've also heard rumors that he is a Knight of Ren are incorrect. Sources also do not believe that they are female or all of them are female. However, that rumor, if rooted in truth, may have sprung forth because some stunt performers for the Knights of Ren were women. They also say that the threat in the film is not the Knights of Ren. So the idea they come from the beyond and are the threat And are the threat was not a good guess. There is still a threat from the beyond, however. We can check them off the list. I will say this. If they did utilize Plagueis, I would be 100% down for that. I think that would be a very good way. And I'll say it as I always do. If they don't do this, I'm totally fine. However, just speculating. If they did use Plagueis, and for some reason he was still way, way back in the shadows, and he was shadow running this whole deal, I would be completely down with that. That, to me, could do both things that I talked about. One, it could make the sequels trilogy still unique in and of itself, and it could tie all the movies together by finally introducing, in physical form, an individual who is integral to this entire set of stories going back to Palpatine. So it would be interesting if Matt Smith was actually playing Plagueis, and that he was the one all along that was kind of pulling the strings in all of this. Again, that's pure speculation on my part. If you want to comment on that, as always, talkshownerd@gmail.com, or you can leave a comment on YouTube. All right, let's get back to the listener feedback.
We have a spark that'll light the fire that'll burn the First Order down.
All right. SJs writes this. Nice podcast as usual. It's always nice to know that I have these types of channels around that are generally more upbeat and positive, because even when the prequels came out and I hated them, I didn't begrudge others who liked them. In fact, I would like to hold back as to not want to spoil people's enjoyment because of what joy that would bring me. There's always room for fair criticism, but there's a difference in criticism and mean-spirited attacks at the fans and filmmakers. I totally agree. He goes on to say, or they go on to say, I think we are going to have an Excalibur moment with Ben and the Legacy Saber too. So I think they want it to remain the same saber as before, because when he first called to it, the saber wanted nothing to do with him. And in The Last Jedi, it couldn't decide who to go to between him and Rey. So there's a progression there. That he's becoming more human and revealing his soul, and maybe he will need to call to that saber in a moment of desperation, and it will save his butt, and he will have an epic scene using it after pulling Excalibur from the stone and being worthy. I think that's a pretty cool concept. Wouldn't it be a tearjerker of a line if Ben's last scene and line is something akin to, I'm going to be with my mom? A lot of people aren't going to like that because a lot of people want Ben to live. Thank you, as always, SJs, though, for the comment. I appreciate it. All right, the Color of Caramel writes this. John, I have a question. I don't know if anyone has already asked, but do you feel, after seeing The Force Awakens and now The Last Jedi, that Lucasfilm and JJ should have simply passed the torch and done the sequel trilogy with only Rey, Finn, Poe, Kylo Ren, and with a small appearance from Han and Leia to explain Kylo's true parentage? But since the damage has been done, and I've been thinking about this recently, do you think a new trilogy should be done with only the new characters and give them a new adventure that shows what exactly the new Star Wars quartet are truly capable of? And when I mean quartet, that includes Ben Solo, because I really would like to see Finn and Poe involved more in the Resistance and how well they flourish in it. And I want to see Rey and Ben going off to do some mission that starts off great, but somehow goes hilariously wrong. All in all, I think Lucasfilm needs to go back to basics when a Star Wars story just focus on the main characters while everyone else were simply the supporting cast. All right, let me dive into this. Let's see. Do you feel that after The Force Awakens and The Last Jedi, they should have simply passed the torch? No, I don't. I think they were trying to do the best of both worlds, and for me personally, they've done a really good job. That would not have bothered me. And maybe this goes back to my initial question, query, pondering, musings about the frustrations in the fandom over The Last Jedi and the fundamental difference between certain fans of Star Wars and their view of the original trilogy versus other fans. My view has always been, I didn't need the big three again. I didn't need Luke, Han, and Leia. If they had done the sequel trilogy just as The Color of Caramel had suggested, I would have been 100% fine with that. And maybe therein lies the difference. I had my time with the prequel, with the original trilogy members. I had those 3 movies. And I didn't need them to be in this trilogy. I know why they were. I think this is part of the big picture. I think Disney acquiring Lucasfilm and doing the sequel trilogy, wrapping up the saga, this was all part of the plan. Moving forward, we know that Benioff and Weiss, through some recent news, the Game of Thrones guys are going to be most likely doing a trilogy. We know that Rian Johnson's trilogy is still going to be out there. We're going to get those new stories that are going to be brand new characters and not tied to the original saga anymore. That's coming. I think that Disney and Lucasfilm was smart to do it the way that they did it. Let's wrap up this saga. Let's make sure that we have the big 3 there. And maybe that's why it didn't bother me in The Last Jedi and why I love Luke Skywalker's arc, because I thought it was great. I didn't need him to do anything spectacular. And he did do something spectacular, but I didn't need him pulling Star Destroyers out of the sky. That was never anything that I desired to see happen. I thought the way that he was portrayed and the way that he went out, spoiler alert, in The Last Jedi was exactly the way Luke would have gone out. So I think those new trilogies coming up are going to be exactly what The Color of Caramel is talking about. I'm glad that Disney and Lucasfilm handled this sequel trilogy the way that they did. I think the fandom would have been really upset if they had not introduced the big 3 at all anymore and they had just been passing figures in these films. And the idea changed, right? The original idea was supposed to be, the first one was Han's movie, the second one was Luke's movie, and the third one was going to be Leia's movie. And that may still be the case, but obviously it's a little bit harder now due to the fact that, Carrie Fisher unfortunately passed away. They go on to say, let's see here. Getting back to the comments. Let's go to Amber Harris writes this: bring the saga full circle. Call episode 9 Revolution. I like Revelations. I like The Chosen One. I think that would be cool. But again, that's depends on whether or not they're going to be playing with that whole idea. I just thought it was a cool title. Tracy L. writes, wow, that so-called Rian Johnson leak we talked about last week is really good. Even though it is probably fake, I wish somebody would write that story and that plot line. If you want to know what I'm talking about, go and listen to episode number 158. Carlos Andres writes this: Girls with Sabers made a whole comparison of the throne scene with sexual intercourse, and they were totally doing it. Even she grabbed his hips and beyond in the fight. Yeah, Girls with Sabers is a really fun podcast to listen to. If you don't, especially for Raylos, that is the quintessential sort of listen for Raylos. Let's see. These picks gave me enough to chew on until April. I'm probably in the minority with that, though, says ZBH. Tracy L. wrote again, regarding Kylo and Rey battle at the end of 9, I'll be disappointed only if it ends with Rey killing Kylo and no each EA Reylo. I know they will most likely have to confront each other in battle at this point, but I'm hoping it ends with a helmet removal and or kiss. Although, it honestly doesn't even make sense for them to really fight each other at this point. I mean, there's a reason why Luke doesn't fight Vader and Kylo in the end. Rey's actions and Ben's feelings for her should reflect that. Moreover, they had so many opportunities to actually kill each other in 7 and 8, and both never go through with it in their actions. I'm hoping we see them working together again in 9. That throne room scene was by far my favorite of all of Star Wars. Yep, totally agree. Thank you for that. Maddie Solo, who also hosts a fantastic podcast, writes this: really enjoyed the show this week. You made such great points, and your genuine love for Star Wars always shines through. Thank you, Maddie. I appreciate that. A couple of thoughts on leaks regarding the duel between Rey and Ben at the end of the film. I think we should keep in mind that little to no plot details were provided in this marketing meeting. So why would Disney just casually mention the climax of the film in front of so many people that might leak it to out like this person did? It seems highly unlikely given how notoriously secretive JJ and Lucasfilm are. Also, the person who posted the leaks admitted that their memory of everything that they heard Let's see here. Let's see. I lost my spot here. Sorry. Was a bit fuzzy. So perhaps they misremembered something when this duel actually takes place. My theory is that the Rey versus Ben duel will be a red herring that is teased in the marketing, but will actually happen somewhere near the midpoint of the movie, and the actual climax will be something much more surprising and unexpected. Thank you for that, as always, Maddie. I appreciate it. And Thea Gaia says this: love is such an important part of fairy tales, and Star Wars is a fairy tale, so of course a romance will be part of the story. The idea of a love story between a light side user and a dark side user is so interesting to me, and the direction that has not been explored in Star Wars movies before to the general audience. I love where Disney and Lucasfilm are taking this. Regarding the leaked photos, I heard someone else say, and I agree, that I believe that Rey and Kylo are reverting back to their old looks as symbolic of their reversion back into their old selves, where they didn't depend on anyone but themselves. Great point. Kylo's cracked helmet symbolized his cracked soul and how broken he is after Rey rejected his proposal. I love the idea of a fight between them being the culmination of the movie, where they finally determine that they can't hurt the other and accept that they love each other. Then they join together to defeat whatever the main threat is, or hunt the MacGuffin together. Great podcast as always. I look forward to it every week. You know what popped into my head just then? If you've seen Mr. and Mrs. Smith, love that movie. Just absolutely love that movie. But that moment when Brad Pitt and Angelina Jolie are fighting, and Brad Pitt just gives up in the house. He's like, I'm done. And she's like, come on. She wants to fight him, right? I would love to see something like that. And that dynamic is really interesting, in my opinion, when you look at when you compare it to Reylo, the dynamic between, obviously neither of those movies have anything to do with each other, but just in terms of relationships, right? The Brad Pitt Angelina Jolie relationship in Mr. and Mrs. Smith is a really, really fun one to watch them work out, and that frustration and how it ends up and they join in the end. I would really love to see that. I'd love to see this conflict between the two of them, between Rey and Kylo, that ends up in that moment where one of them, like Ben, does I'm done fighting you. And Rey's like, come on, bring it, this kind of thing. And then they realize, we really need to be together. Oh. And then Kylo goes, hey, all those hearts and flowers in the mixtapes that I made for Rey totally paid off. I knew they would. Skydrathic writes this: all Star Wars movies are great. Some are more fantastic, but none are bad. The most awesome thing in Attack of the Clones is when they attack, and for that alone is great. Yeah, absolutely, I agree. Let's see. And then Skydrathic was very excited that I mentioned their comments. Thank you very much. I appreciate you writing in. Andrea F. says this: maybe Rey is the MacGuffin. The Resistance has seen her powers and probably feel they need to defeat the First Order. They need her to defeat the First Order. Much like the thought of needing to defeat, of Luke needing to defeat the First Order. The First Order might be seeking her out for revenge since they think that she killed Snoke. Kylo / Ben Solo, of course, will be seeking her out because, well, love. Maybe he's also still a little pissed at her, and maybe he's trying to protect her from Hux and the First Order. That's my guess. Rey is the MacGuffin. All fun things to speculate. And by the way, I love your show. Thank you, Andre. I just appreciate that. I really do appreciate that. I had a comment here from Shlomo, who writes, a friend of the show. I was just looking at the cryptic Anthony Daniels tweets and had a thought. What if C-3PO gets his memory back? Interesting. Freaky. Discuss. I like it. I do. I like what that means. Especially when you consider if they do sort of an echo to Return of the Jedi, maybe he does some more recapping to a group of people that aren't familiar with the story. Just like he did in Return of the Jedi. Wouldn't that be nice? Oh, yes, and then Ben Solo appeared in front of Rey in a hut on Ahch-To, and he took off his glove, and then they touched fingers, and Luke Skywalker was very upset. Hey, I didn't know I could do a C-3PO impersonation. That's the first one I ever did. You all got to hear my first ever C-3PO impersonation. And yes, I thought it was very good. When they touched their fingers, they were crying. It was as if they were making love. I'm sorry. I'll stop. All right. Yoland. I'm going to say this wrong. My apologies, but I want to try to get it as right as I can. Yolintzin Gonzalez Chavez. I hope I got that right. I really tried. Yolintzin Gonzalez Chavez. What a fantastic name. Wow. Sounds like an amazing Star Wars name. Yolintzin. Yeah, I dig that. All right. A continuation of the SNL's sketch in Starkiller Base with Matt with Matt the radar technician making maintenance in the Falcon while putting love cards for Rey in the most awkward places. With the silhouettes of Darcy in the name of Kylo. That should be canon. I love the idea of Kylo Ren. He's in the Millennium Falcon and he's leaving sweet nothings everywhere. How about so they get together. So the end of episode. Oh, here you go. Here's a finale for episode 9. So Ben Solo's redeemed, right? And he's in sort of traditional, like, new Jedi-esque garb. And Rey goes to get on the Falcon, and Ben's not around. And as she reaches the hatch, right, there are the Star Wars equivalent of rose petals. And the rose petals lead up into the Falcon, and then they lead to where both of their lightsabers are stored. You know, because of the implication. Sorry. All right. Thank you for the comment. I appreciate it. Let's move on, shall we? Gay Saga Bane writes this. Kylo Ren's helmet was put back together using that red glue. Kind of reminds me of kintsugi, a Japanese art of repairing broken pottery with gold. Oh, I like it. That's cool. Disney Desi writes this. Remember that everything is coming from a certain point of view. A fight between Rey and Ben doesn't necessarily mean against each other, but could be like the throne room in which they fight on the same side. Also, Rey getting an important lineage doesn't necessarily mean her parents or grandparents. It could be her future lineage, a.k.a. her children with Ben. The end of the Skywalker saga could mean the beginning of the Solo saga. And one more comes from a friend of the show, Matilda Scottney. Writes this. I've watched The Last Jedi in excess of 100 times since the final credits rolled for the first time I saw it. And every time since, I still feel the same about Reylo. While I accept the connection has a romantic element, I definitely think there's a stirring. There is a stirring of romance. I believe the relationship transcends an ordinary falling in love scenario, such as we saw with Han and Leia and Anakin and Padme. Rey represents light. Consider her joy in the Force at her first lesson with Luke and her beautiful smile when she tells him inside me, that same Force. And also her gleeful smile when she twirls her lightsaber on Ahch-To. Ben is dark. The Force within him is dark, and yet he's pulled into the light. What better way for the Force to unite light and dark and bring balance, but to put these two in each other's paths? Ben telling Rey, "You're nothing but not to me," could sound manipulative, as if he wants Rey to join him in the dark. But then he whispers, "Please." In that moment, he is a man telling a woman he loves, clumsily, "To the universe, you may be nothing, but to me, you are the universe," right? Oh, it's very Valentine's-esque. Ben is not a fool, but I do believe he is a slave to his anger. Rey calms him, keeps him closer to the light, and when he says please, he exposes how vulnerable to her he is. Of course, we all know what comes next when she, quite rightly, he's not ready, rejects him and gets mad with her, but that will pass. My two bobs worth, sorry. Keep up the good work, Matilda Scottney. Thank you so much, Matilda, for that. I really do appreciate it. And that wraps up the show for this week. Before I let you go, I want to remind you, I did write a science fiction novel. It is called Embark. It is an epic space opera adventure. I'm hard at work on the follow-up, which will be released hopefully within the next 5 months. If you're a Star Wars fan, which clearly you are because you're listening to this podcast, and you're a reader or you know somebody who's a reader, I would really appreciate it if right now you would stop what you're doing as the podcast wraps up. Go to Amazon.com and purchase either the ebook for $2.99, the paperback for $13.99, or the audiobook. And there's various ways you can pick up the audiobook narrated by me. If I had just a 10th of the individuals listening to this podcast purchase the book today when they listen to it, I could probably get to number 1 on the space opera charts. And I'd love to just get into the top 10. The highest that I've been on Amazon so far is, I think, top 30, right there next to one of the latest Leia books, which was fantastic. I actually have a photo of that. But it would really, if you want to support the podcast, it would really mean the world to me if you haven't purchased the book already. If you would go online and pick up, and again, it's just $3 for the ebook. You can gift it to somebody else, or pick up the paperback or the audiobook. I'd love to be able to get the book in more people's hands, but I'd love to see how high I could get that rating up on Amazon. That would be just fantastic. So if you've enjoyed what you've listened to, go and purchase Embark. Trust me, people of all ages have really, really been digging the book. I'm 46 years old. I've had, 20, 30, male, female. One of the most recent sort of really cool moments that took place was my son, buddy of his, who's 12, might be 13, is reading the book right now. We ended up going to the movies together just recently, and went to go see Lego Movie 2, which was a lot of fun. And he came up to me just so excited. He's like, man, I'm in the middle of the book. It's so great. And he's giving me his speculation on what he thinks is going to happen. And it really was just such a wonderful and unique experience for me, being a first-time author. So please, drop what you're doing. Thank you so much for checking the show out. But drop what you're doing and go to Amazon.com and search for Embark, Jon Justice. And it would just mean the world to me if you pick up a copy of the book for yourself or for somebody else. If not, I just appreciate the fact that you listen to the show every single week. You can drop me an email, talkshownerd@gmail.com. Leave a comment on YouTube. Hopefully next week we've got a title or maybe some footage to talk about. But until then, have yourself a great week. The show is available on Spreaker, Stitcher, Podbeans, iTunes, and the iHeartRadio app. Subscribe to any one of those. Share it with friends. And I guess that's it. Go buy Embark, and may the Force be with you. And here's Obi-Wan Kenobi to say exactly the same thing. I'll talk to you guys again next week. Bye.
The Force will be with you, always.
My nerd world.